Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Hello, fellow do-gooders and friends. I'm your host, Corinna Bellizzi. Each week, I invite you to care more about social and environmental issues so that we can create a better world together. And this week, I want to invite you on a journey to dive back into content that I created with Paul Hawken on regeneration, ending the climate crisis in one generation, as we prepare for the launch of his new book on Tuesday, March 18th. And that book is Carbon, the Book of Life. Now, I had the opportunity to reconnect with Paul today. We're going to be recording on, I believe, March 24th, which means I've got some time to even further dog-ear my copy of this book and really think about the conversation I want to lay before us. But as we prepare for this interview, I want to encourage everyone to go out and pre-order Carbon, and I'm going to lay the case for that for you today. First, I want to dive into the last bit of regeneration, and then I'm going to highlight a few things that really stood out to me in this new work, Carbon, the Book of Life. I think you know I'm a fan. I consider Paul also to be a friend. I have felt transformed through his work. It is part of what led me to add the word regeneration to the byline for this show, Care More, Be Better, Social Impact, Sustainability, and Regeneration. Now, that's revealed in my interview with him from September 21st, 2021, or September, 14th, 15th, it was 2021 at any rate. So first, let's dive into the last part of regeneration, which I have my copy here. You can go and pick this up wherever you love to buy books. It's also available as an audiobook. In the audiobook version, it's read by many of the contributors to this book. And if you enjoy audiobooks, I encourage you to check it out that way. But during my interview with him, he said something that stood out to me. First, he said that he had come to a realization that in each of the books that he writes, there's a moment where he realized that the end of that book portended the arrival of the next book, or that it kind of hinted at what that topic would be or what the continuing conversation would be. So I wanted to read to you the last word. He says, one more thing at the very end of Regeneration on page 234. One more thing. It's not your job to save the planet. The idea of saving the earth is a heavy burden, and you can't do it anyway. Another belief that torques the mind is that carbon is bad. There is no such thing as carbon pollution. It is part and parcel of virtually everything we need, make, and touch. Everything that is alive, delicious, astonishing, and sacred. We have placed extraordinary amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, and we know exactly how we did it. Today, we know how to bring it back home, to bring the planet into balance. The Earth is forgiving about what that balance should be. It is approximately the average level of atmospheric carbon dioxide seen for the past 800,000 years. The carbon we bring home is the food needed to regenerate life on Earth. When we feed the Earth, we heal the climate. Regeneration is the default mode of life. You're able to read this sentence because the 30 trillion cells in your body are regenerating every nanosecond. We can kill, poison, burn, or quell life on Earth, but when that ceases, regeneration begins. Now is the time to bring our life practices, products, cities, agriculture, and all else into alignment with the living world and end the climate crisis. We cannot do this if we believe or assume others will do it for us. We have a common interest, and that interest is served when we come together and join all forms and forces of life. Welcome to Regeneration. Now, there's a reason that I went through over the course of the following 10 weeks of interviewing Paul Hawken and went section by section within the book and gave you my download. pulled out quotes from it. Each of those episodes ranged from basically 15 to 30 minutes. I usually took 6 or 7 pages of notes before I recorded. So it really is a primer on everything regeneration. So I'll link that with our show notes for this episode. I definitely want you to go and check those out. And frankly, it will be the ultimate preparation for carbon. The other thing that Paul said at the close of my last interview with him in September of 2021 is that there was something about falling in love. So when I connected those two ideas, and not falling in love with a person, but falling in love with an idea or with life itself, I connected the idea of the last paragraph that I just read you about carbon and how we should be looking at it, and thought, I wonder if his next book is about falling in love with carbon. Now, I've just finished Carbon, the Book of Life, as of yesterday. And I have to say that I think that's what it is. In a way, it's a love letter to carbon, because carbon is this incredible molecule that is intensely versatile, that can be used in a number of ways, that seems to be one of the most unlikely molecules in a way. And yet, this element is the thing on which all life is centered. It is the thing on which life is built. There are other elements that are far more abundant in our atmosphere, but life isn't based on them. We don't have hydrogen-based beings. We have carbon-based beings. And there's nowhere in the universe that we've yet found another form of life. It does appear that carbon is essential. And so there are a few things throughout this book that really got me thinking. I want to pull a few quotes and then just share my thoughts about them. But really, this is an invitation to pick up this book. The audiobook will be released on the 18th. It is now the 13th, so I haven't had a chance to check that out yet. But this is from page 4 of Carbon. The unswerving belief in the marketplace as a means to create a better world is belied by history. Extracting and selling the biosphere to the highest bidder is the cause of global warming and social injustice. Stepping back from the inordinate obsession with wealth, it is apparent that commerce is eliminating life on Earth to pay shareholder dividends. And frankly, I see no stronger representation of this than our present administration, with the closing of national parks, with the agreements to increase logging on what was national forest land, the loosening of environmental controls, all to extract value, all to be more insular, to be more nationalistic, to take less resources from other areas where they might be more sustainably sourced, and to just look to ourselves. Now, logging, clear cutting is not the path to regeneration, is not the path to biodiversity, is not the path to creating more life on Earth. And what we've learned through studying regeneration is that more life means bringing more carbon home, more bugs, more biodiversity, more birds, all of that. A thriving ecosystem, that brings more carbon home. If we have more of it in the atmosphere, we dissolve more of it in our seas. Our seas become a sink for carbon. Roughly 50% of the carbon that is brought home to Earth is absorbed by the motion of our waves in our seas. And that increases the acidity of our oceans. And with that, what happens? Well, mollusks in their larval state are less able to build shells. They die. We've had massive species die off on land, namely in the insect animal kingdom, as well as in the sea. Estimates are that anywhere close to perhaps even 70% of all species of bugs that existed when I was growing up may be gone by now. Paul and I have talked about this. You'll hear him speak about this, or you'll read it in his book. That, you used to drive through farmland and have to pull over at night to get the bugs off of your lights, your headlights, because you suddenly wouldn't be able to see very far. Because guess what? The bugs, their crushed bodies were all over your headlights, all over your windshields. I remember driving down the I-5 corridor and experiencing something of the same when I would go down to Bakersfield from the Cupertino area, or from Oregon, even when I lived in Southern Oregon, from Southern Oregon all the way to Bakersfield. And we would have to stop at gas stations, sometimes more frequently than to fuel up, just to get the bugs off the windscreen. They're gone now. most of them, in fact. It's quite sad. Now, on page 7, so again, early in the book, he introduces another idea, and this is the idea of cooperation and collaboration. And this is a theme that runs throughout the book. So he specifically attributes this to the evolutionary biologist Peter Kropotkin, who noted early in the last century, cooperation and collaboration are far more effective than competition when the environment is changing and resources are scarce. Now, if I think about this, when resources are scarce, you could argue that we have abundance. We definitely have abundance of food. In America, our waistlines are expanding. In much of the Western world, that's the case. Metabolic syndrome is a massive issue. I myself am hypothyroid, so have to really take care of the foods that I put into my body. And as I think about this particular quote, I am reminded of another fact. If all people on Earth lived like Americans do, we would need 5 or 6 Earths. This automatically means that we are living in a scarcity situation. We need to think about how we're utilizing the resources around us, and we need to increase our collaboration and cooperation. Some are arguing that we are living in a post-capitalist world now, and I would agree with that. I think that we've stress tested capitalism and we're seeing its weak edges. We've essentially proven that living in a capitalistic society both keeps people in lower classes down and also puts forth ideas of white supremacy or supremacy culture in general, creates billionaire classes that don't live by the rules, that essentially take from all around them, that are like cancer. We also should know by now that capitalism creates climate change or increases the rapidity of global warming. We are in a warming phase, but we are seeing unprecedented warming at an unprecedented pace, which means species don't have time to adapt and they die off. The pollution that we introduce to the atmosphere, all of these things create more problems. So this idea of collaboration and cooperation, it's almost like a remaking of how we think about things, a reciprocal nature of life. It's thinking about how life exists with symbiotic relationships between species, like the mycelium or mushrooms that are living within the soil that help transport nutrients to the roots of plants, that help store water within the soil, that increase this living matrix that is the soil on Earth, that supports the drawdown of CO2 from the atmosphere into the soil so we can have that really rich, abundant humus of life in the soil, life affirming, that ultimately can create plants that are more nutritious that we can consume, that creates a symbiotic relationship between the life forms living on it. This is all collaboration. This is all cooperation. It's not capitalism. There is commerce to it. There's exchange of nutrients. There is a way of living together, a symbiotic way of living together. Anyway, it's a beautiful idea. And I had not known about Peter Kropotkin before that moment. So I will be looking more into his work now. So think back to when you were in school. Did we talk much about cooperation or collaboration? Probably not. So this is a quote from page 30 in Carbon. And I want you to think back to perhaps when you were in school as a school child. In school, we were taught that life is a competitive struggle. The word cooperation was not mentioned in science class and was seldom seen in the school. We were graded on a curve, not as a team. We were taught Darwin, not St. Francis. Playground insults, cattiness, hazing, and the occasional pummeling verified the classroom tutorial. In the background was the nightly news, detailing convulsions of regional wars and economic tumult. Yet, I never saw conflict in the apple trees. the creek by the house, or among the crows that gossiped at dusk in the pine trees. There seemed to be two worlds. He's not wrong. We live in the sterile environment that we have created, and we live in the natural world. And the fact that we live less in the natural world is part of what has created challenges for humanity. Disconnection between people, disconnection with our environment. We don't really know the land we live on. We don't feel a connection to place the same way that we used to. It's a beautiful thought, a beautiful idea. And it just exemplifies this whole concept that we are part of a living system. We are part of this together. As we further the journey through this book, you go through different kind of chapters. There are ways of thinking about carbon. The first chapter is specifically on carbon and talking about what makes it a unique element. Then how elements come together, firmament, cellmates. I just read you a piece from Cellmates. Next is with chapter 5, eating starlight, sugar salad, Bucky and Bing, green beans. There's a lot of prose and poetry in this, at any rate. So in Eating Starlight, this is on page 52. Food and taste are no longer about the flow of carbon. They are about the flow of money. Think about that just for a moment. Food and taste are no longer about the flow of carbon. They are about the flow of money. Now, I work in the natural channel. I create products that are in the supplement space, products to be sold to consumers. And I have long felt that there are many products on the market today that are frankly useless. You don't need to build a better mousetrap to absorb nutrients from food. You need to eat better food. But guess what? Eating better food is something that is hard for people to consistently do because our lifestyles are so on the go. So what do? We create supplements, a pill that's supposed to mimic the things that you get from the natural food that you would eat. But everything we put in those pills is not going to change the negatives that you get from eating things that are, ultra processed foods, things that are made into delectable treats, but that don't contain any of the raw nutrients that were in that food in nature. Essentially, we've denatured nutrition. We've created food-like products, and sure, they're edible, but they don't necessarily sustain you the same way. You're more likely to overeat, and they might be high in salt and other things that stimulate the appetite. And our flavor pleasers. Mouthfeel is something that scientists work to perfect. And all of these things come with a price tag. And you can charge more for them, or you can create things that are shelf stable and can sit on a shelf in a warehouse for a year or more. What food can you do that with that's fully natural? Oh, grains and seeds that you could plant in a subsequent year. But really, a piece of fruit, a vegetable? Absolutely not. So we need to think about that. If we go to whole, real foods, we can really improve our access to health and our connection to the natural world. There's some solutions that are posed throughout this book that I didn't see in Regeneration. Novel technologies that are coming about that can help solve some of the problems we face today. Like, for example, building materials are increasingly expensive. We're having a trade war now over steel. So what happens with steel prices? What happens with construction costs? All of these things are going to impact rebuilding things like all the buildings lost to wildfire in Southern California, or anytime you want to build a new space for people to live, create zero waste cities. Yeah, it would be nice to be able to do this with natural materials, but so often they're out of reach. Too expensive. Wood is very expensive right now. So there's this novel technology called InventWood, which was created by this gentleman, Bing. And this is from a chapter called Bucky and Bing. Bing is what this gentleman goes by. He's of Chinese ancestry and was a young genius. He's an incredible individual who's looking at life differently. looking at nanotechnology within the fiber world, within the natural plant fiber world. And so we learn about this inventwood. His name is Ling Bing or Bing Hu. Ling Bing, Liangbing. He is from the Hubei province in China, and he was identified to be gifted, young, and placed in university at 15. By the time he was 20, he had his PhD. Goes to show. At any rate, he created this really great technology that would enable you to use cellulose fibers in such a way that they would be much like the nanotubes of nanotechnology and could basically capitalize on the properties of the cellulose, the strength of cellulose, to create something that was lighter, more durable, fire resistant, and bug resistant, and could be used as building material to replace steel and even be used in the way that wood is. So, really incredible. It can be made from bamboo, which is a grass which grows just like any perennial grass and can be continually harvested. So, the point in the book that comes up that I think is really amazing is, and this is a quote. I'm going to start the sentence. Okay. From page 83. To replace half the worldwide production of steel utilizing bamboo as the sole material source, about 25 million acres would be devoted to growing bamboo, just over 50% of Nebraska farmland, or less than 0.001% of the farmland in the world. It would sequester 106 million tons of carbon annually, replacing 1.7 billion tons of annual emissions from steel. And not only that, but the reliance on steel trade. So that's a really incredible technology that is solvable coming from the material science space. But what's more is that Bing is actually working to improve upon this even further. He's investigating whether this nanofiber material from cellulose could be used to create batteries that are rechargeable. So this is something that looks to be on the horizon. And this, I'm going to just quote directly. Instead of compressing the fibers and making hydrogen bonds, the fibers are separated. Imagine the finest filigrees of minute invisible strands of hair that would allow the free movement of lithium ions. You would have a lighter battery encased in inventwood. So the need to mine for things that go into your lithium ion batteries and your rechargeable cars and cell phones and more could come from an entirely different source, one that doesn't require rare earth minerals, cobalt, um, getting rid of permafrost and just to get at rare earth minerals. Let's see, let's warm the planet further. That sounds like a really good idea. The book goes on to talk about things like fungi and the interconnected nature of our natural world from the soil perspective. I've done a lot of work on this podcast about regenerative agriculture, so I'm not going to go deeply into this, but I do want for people to understand that fungi are different. I mean, they're a part of the animal kingdom. Um, they're not a plant. They can live in anaerobic conditions. They don't need oxygen. They just need sugar. So they get that sugar from the plants that are decomposing. They support the build of really healthy soil. They support the decomposition of the decaying matter. And they're really incredible. And I love the way that Paul put this. This is on page 104 in the chapter called Kingdom, Kindom. In a sense, fungi eat death for breakfast to produce life for dinner. The tomb and womb of life. A key message from the kingdom is that death is the beginning of life. Without fungi, ecosystems would not exist, and neither would bread, wine, yogurt, beer, cheese, chocolate, and psilocybin. Now, all of those things are things I've enjoyed at one time or another. So let's keep the fungi world happy, yeah? I mean, this intricate web of life that is supported by fungi, just understanding that there is commerce between the fungus and the plant, that the fungus that live in our soils enable the soil to retain moisture, enable the soil to support a true living matrix of bugs and everything else so that we can transmit nutrients from one area of the soil to another. I mean, the fungus actually acts as almost like a highway for these nutrients from one area to another. And without that fungus, that interconnected matrix in the soil, nothing's as healthy, and certainly not the plants that we're growing. So, something to consider as we look at this whole picture, if, and this is on page 111, it's a comment on if we do continue to support our traditional conventional agriculture where we, till all the soil and have heavy machinery on that soil and compact all of it down. And essentially like almost creates a really thick, hard, compacted area that's hard for the roots to go through unless you till. So you have to keep tilling. It's like this self-perpetuating prophecy. You then have to also, cover it in all sorts of NPK fertilizers so that the plants can grow. Because guess what? Their roots can't go deep and find other nutrients because you've compacted the soil so much below that first few inches. And you've killed the living matrix of the soil. There aren't a bunch of healthy bugs that are there to create that environment for all of the nutrients that's needed. The matrix of the mycelium aren't there to bring nutrients from one area of the soil to another or one plant to another. The moisture that is present in a really rich soil is devoid. Water runs off the surface as opposed to soaks in. The roots don't go as deep, and the roots act like channels for water to go deeper. So, all of those challenges will exist if we continue conventional agriculture the way we have. So, here's a quote from page 111. Industrial agriculture destroys fungi on hundreds of millions of acres of farmland. If we continue to overtill, overgraze, and place herbicides and fungicides on productive land, mycelial networks will further recede, forfeiting their capacity to lock carbon into the soil. If we lose 8% of the 2,500 gigatons of terrestrial carbon, atmospheric gases, already at a 4.3 million year high, will increase by 100 parts per million. That's the direction we're heading if we don't move towards purely regenerative methods of farming. So, this is why we need to care. Obviously, could go on and on about this book, but I think the core message as it comes to soil is we need to reduce our reliance on inputs like pesticides and fertilizers because we are going to damage and further recede life on Earth if we continue down that road. The fact that I used to drive down to Southern California and have to pull into a gas station before it was time to fill up to clean my windshield. That was because there was so much life present on Earth. And now a lot of that land is just silent. It's quiet. It's dead. The soil has become dust that blows away in the wind. And what can live on dust? Not much. And nothing without inputs like fertilizers. There's one comment on page 138 about the most damaging insecticide, and I want to talk about it because it's what's killing off our pollinators, in particular bees. The most damaging insecticide used on farms today are neonicotinoids, a class of pesticide invented to replace the morbid toxicity of other pesticides. It binds to insects' nerve cells, causing paralysis and death. These types of pesticides were purported to be safer for humans, right? Because they cause insects to die, but they don't seem to harm our health, at least not in a way that we can obviously measure. Now, it does harm our health if we no longer have food pollinated by something like bees and access to honey plummets, among other things. Um, I'm remembering a day when this is probably summers around 2008 or 9, possibly even into 11 or 12, because I think I was living in my house in Scotts Valley when we were getting some of these warnings. but we had brown apple moth infestations. And so these brown apple moths would live in our oak forest. And there's a lot of oak forests here, but they're considered a pest. And so we got warnings in the mail that low-flying aircraft was going to be dispersing these insecticides to take care of this brown apple moth infestation. And I kept thinking, this is like the worst idea ever, but having no ability to change it, right? Um, and I stand by that sense. I would remember going on trail rides with my horse and through the oak leaves, seeing the flutter of wings from these brown apple moths and not understanding why we would need to purely eliminate them. I'm guessing it had something to do with the fact that Martinelli's is close here on the central coast of California, and brown apple moths would create a problem for their crops. But my thinking is that we got to find better ways. I'm sure there would be a better way. Page 166. The conventional food industry. This is 166 to 167. It's a longer quote, but it's really related to everything that we do in the food space. And I think encapsulates a lot of why I care about this book so much. The conventional food industry presumes that industrial agriculture is here to stay, soon to be joined by vertical farms, lab-grown chicken, and vat-cultured meat. Artificial initiatives will move the food system further away from the living system of the soil toward an ever greater concentration of production. Corporate food production envisions farms without farmers, overriding life-giving agricultural techniques because regenerative, land-based methods do not lend themselves to corporate scale profits. Are you an anti-capitalist yet? I mean, it really gets you thinking, right? Like, what are the tenets we want to uphold for our society? How do we build a healthier society? And if you're one of those individuals who bought into this whole concept of make America healthy again, this is the stuff you should care about. Regenerative agriculture, real whole foods, building systems that support farmers, not take away their funding so that they can explore these avenues. And that is frankly what we've done. The Trump administration has taken away funding from a lot of these farms that are working to employ new methods of regenerative agriculture. He goes on, this is again on page 167. Restorative farming techniques and practices have numerous designations: agroecology, ecological, organic, biodynamic, and regenerative encompass most methods. These farming technologies employ the breadth of plant, soil, entomological, fungal relationships in specific landscapes. These techniques are more science-based than industrial methods. Sophisticated, biological, non-toxic ingredients are employed that break down without harm. There are farming techniques that culture the soil's innate microbial population in small vats, liquid ferments that might be called soil kefir, which are then returned to the soil. The land tells the farmer what it wants. End quote. And when the land tells the farmer what it wants, guess what? The farmer can give it to them. So with that, I want to encourage everyone here to pick up a copy of Carbon. It is 194 pages before the acknowledgments. And what I'll tell you is that while it is nonfiction, because of Paul's prose and the stories he tells throughout, it is really readable. And, I got through it as a working mom in a week with, 15, 20 minutes here and there to read it. I read the bulk of it actually last night. So I got from about page 90 to 194 in just a few hours. And I'm a slow reader. I like to read slow because I like to digest what I'm reading and think about it as I go. And this book was no exception to that rule. That's really great. So I want to close with Paul's last paragraph from the last chapter. And this chapter he closes with is called Conscious. Where you are is where you are most effective. The power to act does not lie elsewhere. Fundamental human rights and needs must be met. Everyone on earth comes first. There is no second. Revive, honor, and nourish the wild and bountiful lives that forever astonish us with their splendor and grace. The movement to restore life on earth is not a repair job. It is transformative, an entirely new experience of self, the visceral awareness that our life is coincident with every being on the planet. Our intention and reward are the same: to experience and express the irrevocable connection to all beings. It is our only way forward. In short, regeneration. It's our only way forward. We need to maximize life. So, Carbon, the Book of Life, out March 18th, wherever books are sold. You can pick up your copy and pre-order it on paulhawken.com. I will include links with show notes, as well as to my past interviews with Paul Hawken, and also the 10-episode series that I did on regeneration. Now, I also encourage you, if you have a specific question that you'd like me to ask Paul, send it on to me. Send me an email note or make a comment wherever you're picking up this podcast. You can make a comment on Spotify. You can make a comment on YouTube. And you can send me an email directly to hello@caremorebebetter.com. With that, I want to thank you for your time today and really encourage you to get out there and do what you can to support more life on Earth. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.